Alrighty, party peoples of the interwebs, I can say with certainty that I have never told anybody how to vote, but I certainly let people know what I think of them, depending on who they vote for, and if you vote for a liberal,
you are an idiot.
Viva Fry, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida Rumbler in my home office on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in the beautiful free state of Florida, and I'm going to give you a bit of the update as to what's going on with the Canadian elections. But first I will address a certain accusation being levied against the Viva Fry.
Viva, you've changed since you've moved to Florida.
Now, first of all, life is change. Heraclitus said it, you never step in the same river twice. If you don't change, congratulations, you're an inanimate carbon rod.
Hey, what is that? It's an inanimate carbon rod!
And more importantly, if you haven't changed over the last 5 years, given what the government has done to you, you are an absolute idiot who is probably still voting liberal. So yes, I certainly have changed over the last 5 years, over the last 10 years, over the course of my life, lest I be sucking at my mother's breast at the age of 46. 46 years old, I'm going to be this May. Holy cow. Yes, I've changed, but hopefully I have not changed with certain core principles, that being my intellectual honesty and my astute observations of reality. And when people say, Viva, you've changed, they always mean it in a very juvenile, I no longer agree with you. What happened to you, man? You used to be cool. I don't know what to do with my life anymore. I'm going to law school.
What happened to you, man? Used to be cool.
I'm still cool.
Nah, you've changed, man.
Well, I do have this robotic prostate, but you can't see it. Oh, you can.
And the most recent wave of accusations, Viva man, you used to be cool, comes because of my apparent new critique of Pierre Poilievre from people who apparently haven't been around the channel for very long.
Because I have always been critical of Pierre Poilievre.
I have criticized Pierre Poilievre, and I have given him credit where he deserves it because, surprisingly, I am not a partisan hack, despite what my trolls might say. I am reasonably objective, and I have only wanted to make Pierre Poilievre a better leader. So I've given him credit, but I've also criticized him when he has been a poor leader. Here's a beautiful tweet from August 19, 2020. I had never heard of @Pierre Poilievre until this week, but I think he will become a household name in Canadian politics. Breaking down @Justin Trudeau testimony from this week. Watch and share away. Poilievre, #Trudeau scandal, #Canadian politics. Pierre Poilievre is smart, despite what his haters say. Pierre Poilievre is charismatic, but Pierre Poilievre, for good or for bad, and I've been saying this for 4 years now, is a fair weather politician. It seems Pierre's policies, Pierre's politics depend on which way the political winds are blowing, and this is something I've been saying for over 4 years before I even came to Florida. In response to a tweet from Pierre Poilievre from August 14, 2021, socialism means poverty and dictatorship. Democracy requires freedom, free speech, free thought, and free markets. Sign up now to support freedom from socialism in Cuba. To which I responded, sorry, Pierre, tone deaf and out of touch. Your party just booted a candidate for being anti-vaccine passport. Your party supports a carbon tax. You are no longer a party of free speech, free thought, and free markets. August 14, 2021. From June 2nd, 2022, or February 6th, 2022, whenever Doug Ford was re-elected, congratulations to Doug Ford and his team on a strong majority win. To which I responded, or, maybe criticize the guy who enforced lockdowns, police state curfews, mandatory vaccines, and the like @Pierre Poilievre. It's not because he got re-elected that he's not a tyrant. And a little later, this one, I know that I was in Florida because I remember where I was when I got the call. Did you hear what Pierre Poilievre just said about Christine Anderson? And I heard what he was alleged to have said. I couldn't believe it, and it turned out to be true. This is what Pierre Poilievre, the so-called conservative leader, had to say about Christine Anderson at the time when she came to visit Canada. Poilievre said his MPs were unaware of her, quote, vile, end quote, views, and said they regret meeting with her. Quote, frankly, it would be better if Anderson never visited Canada in the first place. She and her racist, hateful views are not welcome here, end quote, he said in a written statement. To which I tweeted at the time, well, @Pierre Poilievre finally eliminated all doubt and showed his true colors. The man who decries, quote, cancel culture, end quote, engaging in cancel culture. What, quote, racist, hateful, end quote, views does @Anderson AFD MDEP espouse? Also, telling a foreigner to, quote, go home, end quote, is the definition of xenophobia. Full disclosure, as always, although this is a well-known fact, some people think it's a source of mockery, I ran for the People's Party of Canada in 2021. We tripled our votes nationwide. I ran in NDG Westmount, a riding that had gone liberal by over 50% for the last 30 years, save and except 1 year where it went to the NDP when Jack Layton was the head of that party. I ran for that party before deciding to, if only temporarily, leave Canada because the People's Party of Canada was the only party that espoused my views, that respected our God-given charter rights, something the Conservative Party of Canada, or sometimes I say the so-called failed Conservative Party of Canada is very reluctant to do. So while you might accuse me of being partisan to the PPC, I recognize that Maxime Bernier has zero chance of becoming the next Prime Minister of Canada. I recognize that that is a new startup political party that will be lucky if it gets 2 or 3 seats in Parliament, but I think those seats are necessary if only to have a voice of actual opposition. Now, sometimes you criticize people because you hate them, and sometimes you criticize them because you want to make them better people. When I criticize Justin Trudeau, it is because I hate him, I expect nothing better of him, I do not expect him to ever change. When I criticize Pierre Poilievre, I expect him to grow and evolve over the years, despite what many of you out there might think. When I criticize Pierre Poilievre, it is not to tear him down, it is hopefully to sensitize him, to make him a better politician, a better leader of Canada, something that has yet to happen. So yes, while he will be the lesser of the evils, should he get elected as Prime Minister, he'll be the lesser of the evils, but congratulations, you'll still end up with a certain degree of evil, a man who has not changed for the better over the last 4 years. Oh, but Viva, don't you see, if he says these things, he'll never get elected. If he comes out and stands up for women's rights vocally during an election cycle, he'll never get elected, so he can't do that. If he comes out and condemns the convictions of Tamara Lich and Chris Barber for that wicked, stupid political persecution, he won't get elected. So you gotta wait until after he gets elected to see if he's going to do it. If you ask the Conservatives to specifically identify how many new immigrants they're going to welcome in, you'll get a wishy-washy answer. Maybe you have to wait until after the election. Maybe it's 250,000 a year. Who knows? But he's the lesser of the evils, so shut your damn mouth, Viva, and stop criticizing him. So enough criticizing Pierre Poilievre in the hope that he grows a political spine. He's still got 3 weeks to do it, so fingers crossed. Let's go to criticize the Liberals, who I hate, who I want to destroy, who have no place in a position of power, and somehow their Liberal followers are too stupid to understand that. And by way of example, let's start slowly with a tweet from Mark Carney, who's always promising a utopia of a future, ignoring the last decade of Liberal devastation. Mark Carney, at Mark J. Carney, 3 passport-carrying WEF, Davos-speaking, Bilderberg meeting-attending globalist whore. We've got a lot to build in this country, and we need a lot more builders, so we'll cover training costs and make it easier to work anywhere in Canada. It's going to be a great time to be in the skilled trades. To which I responded, always promising the future to distract from the failure of their past, quote, leadership, end quote. It's what every dictator does. Promise utopia while delivering hell, and then blaming others for the hell that they have delivered. The Liberals have been in power for a decade. In fact, just to fact check myself, they've been in power for 9.5 years. They have brought nothing but devastation, destruction, division, and more to Canada, and now they're running on basically promising to undo the consequences of their last decade of failed policy. And when I say that if you vote for the Liberals, you are an idiot, here is what one of their idiotic sycophants is saying on Twitter. Henry A. at Henry AGS. In Canada, carbon tax is down. Gas prices are down. Taxes are cut. Interprovincial trade is up. Canada's reputation is up. The Canadian dollar is up. The far right is down. Tamara Lich, Chris Barber found guilty. Nature is healing. And then you have a picture of that weasel, Mark J. Carney, globalist whore. To which I responded, carbon tax, ... a creation of the Liberals. High gas prices, ... a consequence of Liberal policy. High taxes, ... a hallmark gift of the Liberals. Imagine having a political base that is so retarded they will re-elect you after you last minute and just in time for an election temporarily undo the mistakes they implemented over the last decade. That is the Liberal Party and its idiot followers. I could also have added that, yeah, the Canadian dollar is up to a whopping 70 cents, up from a disgustingly low 67 cents. Congratulations, yet another consequence of failed Liberal policy. I could also have added, yeah, congratulations, Chris Barber and Tamara Lich have been convicted on mischief, the longest mischief trial in the history of Canada, political persecution from the get-go, an absolute waste of taxpayer dollars, and where has Pierre Poilievre been on all of this?
Absolutely silent.
But my personal favorite, absolutely emblematic of the abject stupidity, although I suspect it has to be financed by the Liberals. Nobody is quite this stupid. Let's listen to this tweet. Guy Felizella at Guy Felizella. Don't ever forget who supported the Freedom Convoy and brought them coffee and donuts. Vote wisely. In reference to a tweet from Cult Montreal, #irony, quote, the Freedom Convoy was, without question, one of the low points for conservatism in Canada and one of the most divisive and disturbing events in recent Canadian political history. Its goal was to overthrow a legally elected government, and Pierre Poilievre championed their cause. From Cult Montreal. Yup, it's a cult indeed. I read a tweet that is so stupid. One of my criticisms against Pierre Poilievre is he didn't do enough to support the convoy because he thought he would get blowback if he did, and congratulations, he's getting blowback for something that he didn't even do, which is sort of stolen valor in my views, because he really did not support the trucker convoy the way he should have and the way a leader would have, but nonetheless, he still gets blamed for having not done what they say he did that he didn't actually do. I had to go see this guy's profile, and then I was really blown away by the abject stupidity. Guy Felizella at Guy Felizella. I support both harm reduction and recovery. Overcame decades of homelessness and addiction. ADHD is my gift. Inspirational speaker. Opinions are my own. And then in his pinned tweet, it says, not bad for a, quote, guy, end quote, who had to be brought back to life 6 times and struggled with homelessness and addiction for decades in hashtag DTES. I wouldn't be alive today without harm reduction, and I wouldn't have the life I have today without my recovery. First party of 5, hashtag family photo, hashtag we do recover. Not knowing his story and taking him at his word on the internet, which might be a stupid thing to do on the internet, but I'll take him at his word. He's a recovering addict, and good for him. Godspeed, God bless me, he live a long, blessed life. He's supporting the party that has decriminalized hard drugs in Canada, causing unimaginable death and devastation, and turning this once beautiful country into the fentanyl capital of the world. And don't take my word for it, listen to the reporting in the Telegraph. How decriminalization made Vancouver the fentanyl capital of the world. The city is gripped in an opioid crisis worse than America's. Locals say overly liberal drug laws have sparked a catastrophe. July 9, 2024. A man that allegedly overcame homelessness and addiction supporting the party that is causing homelessness and addiction. I don't know how much stupider any voters can get to continue to support that party. Viva Fry at the Viva Fry. Unbelievable that a guy who says he struggled with addiction would support the Liberal Party and their decriminalization of drugs and oppose the trucker convoy that protested due to the lockdowns and the negative impact it had on addiction. Hey, at Guy Filizella, why don't you go watch the interview I did with the mother whose 2 children died of overdose as a result of the COVID lockdowns? You should be ashamed of yourself. Over 600 Canadians die every single month from opioid overdoses, and something like 81% of that relates to the fentanyl trade. All problems of the Liberals' creation. And this guy says, yeah, the trucker convoy was the problem, not my Liberal Party that has literally destroyed Canada. How could anyone be so stupid or disingenuous? Well, they could be paid. That's always possible. I suspect Carney is running something of a Kamala Harris campaign in that they are, in fact, paying influencers to go put out a positive message for the Liberal Party. How else can people be so stupid and ill-informed? The rampant partisan propaganda of the CBC state-funded broadcasting to the tune of $1 billion a year, supporting the party that has promised to almost double their budget if they get reelected as compared to the other party that has promised potentially to defund them. Who do you think they're going to report favorably for? And by way of quintessential example, here's some propaganda coming from the CBC as relates to how bad the Conservative Party of Canada allegedly is. Andrew Friesen at Friesen_F. Wow, reports of Poilievre not allowing questions from certain reporters and his staffers pushing and shoving journalists at his events. What's next? He's just going to hop in a big truck and honk at everyone? To which I replied as follows. CBC putting out negative reports on the Conservatives? The same CBC that sued the Conservatives for copyright infringement in 2021, case was dismissed. The same CBC that the Conservatives promised to defund if elected and Liberals promised to increase their funding if elected. Yep, I'm sure the reporting is going to be objective and unbiased. At CBC News is fake news, Pravda state-funded propaganda. So that is something of an update on the 2025 elections coming out of Canada, albeit a bit of a ranty one. Oh, Viva, you changed. You didn't used to rant quite so much. Well, the world didn't used to be in such a state of disarray, and it really seems that coming out of Canada, the choices are between evil or the lesser of the evils, and it seems that evil is leading in the markets by a lot. And while I may have changed physically, geographically, and become a little bit more cynical as to the state of the world, I have not changed in the level of my intellectual honesty. I still hope that Pierre Poilievre can become the leader that Canada needs. I'm just not even certain that he's going to get the opportunity, despite all of the fence-sitting and not doing what a true leader needed to do in the moment that he thought was going to get him elected in the first place. But most importantly, it's actually not most importantly, go down there and make sure that you are subscribed, that you have notifications turned on. If you want to support the work that we do, you can go to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. $10 a month, $100 for the entire year for the best community out there. Most importantly, and I mean this, exercise, eat healthy, sunlight, talk to people in real life, and now you know your vlog. Peace out, peeps. Booyah!
This is our last day with the Conservative campaign, and we have faced some very tough message control from the party, not only breaking with tradition in the sense that we are not allowed to accompany the campaign, but also we've seen great control over the questions. We have not been allowed to ask any questions during the week that we've been with the Conservatives. Today we made an effort to get a question, and they told us that we could ask one, but that it had to be my colleague Tom Parry who asked the question. We responded that I was the one who had the question, and we preferred that I asked it. At that point, they took our question away and gave it to another outlet. We've also seen efforts to find out what reporters are going to ask, to pressure them to reveal what their question will be before the news conference. And of course, that's asked before the party decides who gets to ask a question. And we've also seen some fairly heavy-handed treatment by Conservative Party staffers, including some pushing and shoving, as we saw on the public wharf at Petty Harbour in Newfoundland. So it's been a difficult week. It's difficult to get the same level of accountability from the Poilievre campaign as it has been from past Conservative campaigns or from the other parties in this election campaign. David.
All right, Evan, thank you. This is CBC's Evan Dyer in Trois-Rivières, Quebec.